Good afternoon, everybody. It's 5:30, so we're going to start. This meeting will be broadcast on YouTube in accordance with the first paragraph on the front of your papers, just so that brief reminder. Apologies for absence. Declarations of interest by councillors. Item 3, MCA 19/1 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11, 12. Are you all happy that I sign these minutes? To receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Questions by councillors?
None received.
Matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committee.
There were none.
Item 7, MCA 19/2, the forthcoming decisions list on page 13. No comments? Thank you. Item 8, MCA 19/3, the General Fund. Sorry? Yes.
I'd just like to clarification on which is the most current decision list, because we've been given one dated 7th of June. Are we approving that or the one dated 31st May?
Thank you, Chairman. So you're not approving it, you're just noting it, but it will be the one with the most recent date. What we tend to do is publish the relevant one at the time the agenda is published, but it's a live document that's constantly updated on the website, so inevitably there's a more recent version.
So item 8, MCA 19/3, the General Fund Financial Outturn for 2018-19. It's going to be introduced by Councillor Whitehead. I'm sorry.
And here I am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce report MC 19/3 on the General Fund Financial Outturn, which starts on page 25 of our Cabinet papers. Madam Chairman and members, we've been blessed with an abundance of extra, mainly one-off income in 2018-19. The overall picture is that we are 3.462 million ahead of the balanced budget we set ourselves at the start of the year. Now that's a big number, but just 4 items make up over 3/4 of that variance. And they're set out in paragraph 5.2, and they are business rates of 1.934 million, the SIL 5% admin slice at 341,000, a housing benefit subsidy from the government of 204,000, and election reimbursements and money previously set aside for elections but no longer needed, which total 142,000. Now clearly the extra business rates receipts are by far and away the largest item. And since the introduction of the retention of business rates, we've always cautioned in our budget papers that the forecasting of our business rate income with its fluctuating business base alongside a tardy appeal system which can backdate rebates for several years, these would always be subject to a high level of forecasting uncertainty, compared to the old revenue support grant system we used to work under. Now, among the variances this year is a Section 31 grant at 716,000, which has doubled as a result of us being in the business rates retention pilot. Now, despite the inherent uncertainties, we see establishing better systems to improve business rate forecasting as a key objective for the finance team in 2019-20. So we're recommending that all this 1.934 million of additional business rates received are transferred to the business rates equalisation reserve. The balance on that will then be just below 3 million. But because allocated deficits work 2 years in arrears, we actually anticipate that account falling to just above 1 million by the 31st of March 2021. Now, a tabulation of all the various variances that go to make up the net 3.462 million are set out in section 5.4, along with detailed narrative explanations against each item. The items are presented in that table, firstly in descending order of the favourable variances, and then descending order of the adverse variances, and in this way readers of the report can easily ascertain those items having the larger effects. I'd like to draw members' attention to development control, where planning income is 391,000 favourable, but we have spent more on professional, ecology and landscape advice, as well as in robustly defending planning appeals, so that net overall for that area is 82,000. We've also saved against budget on minimum revenue provision, which is effectively depreciation charges, and also benefited from lower than budgeted borrowing costs on Gateway 14. But the key message that I want to convey to members is that our surplus is primarily due to additional income, as our day-to-day expenditure is generally in line with budget. There are, though, a couple of expenditure items I feel merit a mention. Members will note the overrun in ICT costs and the explanations given in the report. In strategic planning, we show 224,000 of savings in joint local plan, professional, legal and examination costs, but these really just represent delayed expenditure rather than any real savings, and hence the recommendation is to carry these forward, the 224,000, in the joint local plan earmarked reserve. Now, all the proposed specific earmarked reserve transfers are set out in section 5.8, and requested carry forward requests are set out in section 5.9. Now, the net effect of all the above is still to leave 1.165 million to be still assigned. And I'm proposing that 500,000 be prudently put aside into a commercial development risk reserve, whilst we are still in the early stages with the extensive pipeline of our own local developments, those being Gateway 14, the various school sites, and our headquarter sites. Now, these developments, by their nature, carry a higher risk than a mature CIFCO-style income-generating real estate assets. After that $500,000, there would remain 665,000, which will transfer to the Growth and Efficiency Fund. The Growth and Efficiency Fund movements are shown in a high-level summary in section 5.10, and then in Appendix B, members will find all the projects fully itemised. Turning now from revenue to capital, in the year we spent 34.962 million and incurred capital commitments of a further 3.176 million. In addition, there are 7 areas in which we wish to make further capital expenditure but have not yet made those commitments. These are itemised in section 517 and comprise a total of 983,000 of capital carry forward requests. Overall, taking all this into account, there's an increase in our capital programme by a further 607,000 beyond the revised capital programme. A full summary of the capital programme for 18-19 is set out in Appendix D. Members, I realise there's a great deal of detail contained within the 25 pages of Report 19/3 for members to take on board. I'm sure members will join me in acknowledging all the recent hard work and diligence of our finance team as they have closed the financial books for the year, produced a detailed statement of accounts for both councils, as well as pulling together this report and its equivalent for BABA. So now, prior to answering any members' questions on the report, I'd first like to move all the recommendations are set out in section 3 on page 26. I would ask for someone to second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm more than happy to second the proposal.
Anybody have any questions? Councillor Eburn.
Speak. So item. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. For if I may, I have two questions, if I may, run them both at once. Firstly, just with regard to business rates, I just wonder if you could advise whether there will be any kind of project or working group looking at forecasting business rates for the next year, taking into account that, you know, that has been a large one-off payment, but I just wonder if there's any work that's going to go on to look at forecasting that. And secondly, with regards to the Growth and Efficiency Fund, I note the transfer of 665,000 to that fund, but also note that there's a balance of 9 million, as shown on pages 39 and 40 of the report. Yet a balance on Appendix B of only 500,000 to be spent. So I just wondered if you could advise what the plan is for the remaining amount of the Growth and Efficiency Fund, and whether there are opportunities to put forward potential projects for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When I first got this report, obviously the first thing that hit me was the extra business rates, and so I brought this up with the finance team, and I was told that, as I said in my introduction, it's a key objective of the finance team to look at ways of improving forecasting of business rates. And I think that really is a sort of officer tasked thing to do, rather than have a member working party on it, because it is so specific and technical, if you like. But yes, I can confirm that, let's say, that really is a key objective going forward. I mean, most of it is one-off amounts of income, but it's still frustrating when they come through later in the year, rather than perhaps be planned ahead. Just turning to the Growth and Efficiency Fund, as you say, yes, we've got a 9 million balance on there. I mean, thinking back to when this first started in 2011, and it was called a Transformation Fund, it was very much, most of the projects, I think, were very much financed 50-50 between Baber and Mid Suffolk as part of the working together and reorganisation. Now we got to the situation where I don't know the exact Baber figure at the moment. I suspect it's somewhere more like 500,000 compared to our 9 million. So going forward, those sort of opportunities of working 50-50 will obviously be limited. I think in the past as well, we've had two councils, two groups of members that been able to bring forward ideas. As we go forward now with mainly just a Mid-Suffolk fund, obviously there's only half the people to do that, so that will slow things down. But the whole idea is to look for growth and efficiency opportunities in which to spend this. We would certainly welcome ideas from all members, and I think a number of this for one-off type expenses, and I think thinking back to some of the ideas that were brought forward by the Greens a couple of years ago, those were perhaps, rather than for budgeting, were more for transformational growth and efficiency type spends. So yes, we'd welcome those, and there's a lot of money to spend, so let's get on and spend it.
Certainly, as I outlined in my leader's speech at the last full council, I have got some ideas for spending money. But I'm always happy to hear from other people who've also got ideas for spending money. So I'm happy to have a chat with you and see what we can come up with. Councillor Field.
Thank you. discussion of spending money always feels vaguely uncomfortable in some company, but there you go. Really, my question was just looking through this analysis. There's an awful lot of spend or income that we didn't expect, and spend perhaps is less than anticipated, and an awful lot of line items where there is substantial overspend. Personally, never been a believer in sort of cooking your activity to meet a budget when you can do more effective things by being flexible. But I just noticed things like costs associated with the grounds and site maintenance across council-owned car parks was not previously forecast. And there's some issues in ICT costs, things like the expenditure on software licences been identified as ongoing. Just somewhat surprised by the level or number of inaccuracies, and was really looking for the finance portfolio holder to suggest whether he's really happy with the accuracy of the forecasting, or is there work to do there?
Right. An interesting question. I certainly would not say I was complacent, but I do feel, and this is after probably 3 years in this particular role, and probably another 4 or 5 years of actually observing the numbers from a backbench point of view, that most of our surprises have been positive rather than negative. And to me, the amount of detail in the report and the amount of variances we see highlight just how a complex organisation and just how many strands there are that go through this district council. So although people outside may just say, well, the district council just empty our bins, what else do they do? The reality is that by looking through a report like this and seeing all the various headings, just demonstrates to me, what a complex organisation we have here, just how many services we do provide. But to conclude, I do feel comfortable that we have a good, decent handle on the numbers, but I'm not complacent either.
I can answer the question on the ICT costs. These were as a result of implementing Skype for Business. The Skype that we were using prior to our move here did not offer us the same benefits as we get now. And unfortunately, the costs were not identified or budgeted for. And not only weren't they included in 18-19, but they also weren't included in 19-20. And so that's why we're also doing a more detailed analysis of our telephony costs, and are in the process of finalising a report which will be coming to SLT in the near future. Councillor Brewster.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Perhaps one of the finance officers will correct me if I am completely wrong on what I'm going to say. But the car park charge, the charges to the car parks, I believe they may well have been because of the car park on the Oldie side, which was certainly refurbished after we purchased Oldie. So there is an income from that for the car parks as well. I hope I'm right in that there. Thank you.
Yes, the officers confirm that. Councillor Whitehead.
Sorry, just thinking on my feet, but perhaps I could just also add another thought to the question that Councillor Field raised. The fact that we have quite a lot of positive variances in our reports, I mean, I think to me that gives light to the concept, perhaps again out in the public, that councils always spend their budgets and make sure every penny is spent in March, which is why you see the roads being repaired or whatever. And the fact that we don't just get all ours back to zero there shows that we don't have that mentality. The fact that we have some overruns as well, I think, means that we don't have that mentality to say, you've spent your last penny of budget, now stop spending. If there's a valid reason to spend more, then we do spend more, and therefore the overall result of that is we get positive and negative variances.
Thank you. You know, totally agree with the points that John Whitehead has just made, you know, that it's obviously ludicrous to go spending the end of your budget on 1 million paper clips because you want to make sure that you came in on budget. That's obviously not something. It's very welcome to see that council doesn't indulge in those sort of practices. But it just felt that things like the Skype costs are pretty substantial, and if you're going to indulge in an activity like that, you clearly have to you know, estimate what it's going to cost before you start, declare that, get approval for it, and then do it. And you know, good that you've been keen on doing something which is quite modern and forward-looking, but just a bit of a surprise to see numbers of that size appearing in the budget at the last minute.
It's not at the last minute. Those were also in the previous report that came to us. But I totally agree. Lessons have been learnt. So, any more questions? So, I have a proposer and a seconder for recommendations 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4 on page 26. Can I have a show of hands, please? All in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on next to item 9, MCA 19/4, the housing revenue account, financial outturn for 2018-19 on page 51. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. I'm pleased to now introduce the second outturn report of the day, report 19/4, starting on page 51, which covers the outturn for 18-19 of our ring-fenced housing revenue account. This account covers the council housing stock, which is presently 3,285 homes, along with associated garages and land holdings. In the year under review, we had budgeted an in-year deficit of 662,000, whilst this account is still working under the centrally imposed burden of the 1% rent reductions over the 4-year period 16-17 to 19-20, which was centrally imposed by government. But the housing revenue account must always be reviewed within the context of the regularly updated 30-year HRA business plan, rather than just a narrow focus on 1 year. Now, the outturn we are reporting shows a deficit of 495,000, which is 167,000 improvement over budget. And the table set out in section 5.6 shows actual and budget numbers for the various main headings, and then section 5.7 sets out in much greater detail the drivers behind the various variances. So in my introduction today, I'd like to bring certain key items to members' attention. Repairs and maintenance show a 672,000 adverse to budget, and of this, 525,000 is attributable to BMBS, which is our Baber and Mid Suffolk Building Services. This is mainly due to higher than expected external contractor work carried out during void periods under the project to reduce the number of void days. Now, over the last 18 months, we've reduced overall number of void days from 54 to 25 days, which is a 54% improvement. Property services shows 146,000 adverse variance, the bulk of which relate to the whole house servicing contract with Blue Flame. Sheltered housing shows 111,000 adverse variance, which includes increased utility costs, ICT costs, insurance premium, and scheme manager salary charges. Depreciation shows an adverse variance of 360,000, but in reality this is balanced by an equivalent improvement in the funds available in the major repair reserve. Now, these various adverse variances I've just noted have been offset by a 1.478 million favourable variance in respect to the revenue contribution required to fund capital outlay. 360,000 of this relates to the depreciation contra I just mentioned, and 1.118 million comes from using more capital receipts than anticipated. So overall, as I said earlier, the net result is 495,000 in-year deficit, and this needs to be taken from our strategic priorities reserve. The reserve movements are shown within the table in section 5.6. Turning now from revenue to capital, these are detailed, set out in sections 5.9 through to 5.14 of the report. We spent 7.755 million in the year and incurred further contractual forward commitments of 2.199 million. In addition, there are carry-forward requests totalling 675,000, of which 609,000 is for planned maintenance and 66,000 is for disabled adaptations. Taken all together, this takes our capital commitment to 75,000 over budget, but that is less than 1% of the total HRA capital spend. Again, prior to answering members' questions on the report, I'd first like to move the recommendations. These are set out in section 3 on page 51. Those are that the outturn be noted, the 495,000 deficit be funded from the reserves, and the capital carry forward requests be approved. Thank you.
May I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second, Lady Chair. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. I have a proposal. Oh, sorry, Councillor Field.
A bit slow, expecting other questions from your end of the chamber. Really, I was just going to question the BMBS figures. It's a pretty substantial adverse variance, but it obviously reduces void delays and therefore increases revenue from the housing stock. I wondered if we have any figure for what the compensating improvement in revenue was from having places void for less than half the time they used to be.
Councillor Whitehead.
I don't have that figure myself just immediately to hand. I don't know whether Gavin or Tricia.
Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. So just to give you some calculations based on the void performance that you've seen, the average rent for a council home is £11.43 per day. Hence, a 10-day reduction in void times would achieve an additional income of £114 per void. With an average of 200 voids per annum, the council would receive an additional rental income of £22,860 per annum for every 10-day reduction. Average void times have reduced by more than 30 days since the void project began, which is a total of 68,580. There are obviously other savings, such as council tax contributions that we don't pay when the property is occupied, and obviously assuming that some of the properties occupied are people moving from bed and breakfast or temporary accommodation, then there's obviously savings from there as well.
Did you want to come back on that?
I was going to say there's obviously also a social value associated with that as well, but that was quite a reasonable return, but we spent 526k to get about £76,000 worth of benefit. Interesting figure.
I have a proposer and a seconder. So the recommendations are on page 51, item 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3. Can I have a show of hands, please, in approval? Item 10, MCA 19/5, quarter 4 performance outcome reporting, on page 63. So, Cabinet members, I would like to present the quarter 4 performance report to you. This is the final report for the 2018-19 financial year. Whilst the report provides a summary of our performance, the appendices provide greater detail and trends, along with a reflection of some of our key achievements during the period. Our robust performance framework widely reflects the activities of the Council and will continue to report on measures associated with our key priorities. Once again, I am delighted that there are many areas in the report where our performance is exceeding our targets. And over the coming year, we will start to introduce some benchmarking data where possible. I would like to recommend that Cabinet members agree that the performance report and the performance outcome information tabled at appendices A to H reflects the Council's performance for January to March. And I would like a seconder for that. Thank you.
I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Flatman. Do we have any questions? Anybody down there? Councillor Field.
Just a question about the post 64 corporate resources. It says HR 01, HR 02 talks about number of days lost due to sickness and shows some good improvements and things. I just wondered, do you have a measure of the average number of days lost to sickness per member of staff? Or I don't think it's in there. I couldn't find it.
I have got the figures somewhere, but they're buried in my computer. So if it's okay, I'll come back to you on that.
That would be great. Obviously, I'm intent on comparing it with the county figures, just for my own interests. And
yes, I have got the figures. I think they were dated a couple of months ago, but I'll come back to you on those.
Okay.
Thank you. So I have a proposer and seconder for MCA 19/5. Can I have a show of hands all in approval? Thank you. Item 11, MCA/19/6, Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, Use of Legislation and Updated Policy, on page 121. So this report is to inform councillors about issues relevant to the use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, brackets REPA 2000, and to provide a refreshed policy for approval. By way of introduction, REPA provides a legal framework for the Council to use covert methods of surveillance and information gathering to assist in the detection and prevention of crime in relation to an authority's core functions. The legislation ensures that any investigatory activity conducted by the Council is legal, proportionate and necessary. It was introduced to ensure that individuals' rights are protected while also ensuring that law enforcement and security agencies, including local authorities, have the powers they need to do their job effectively. Some of the changes I wish to draw your attention to include the creation of the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, IPCO, in September 2017, following the abolishment of the Office of Surveillance Commissioners, OSC. The Intelligence Services Commissioner's Office and the Interception of Communications Commissioner's Office. The IPCO is now responsible for the judicial oversight of the use of direct covert surveillance by public authorities throughout the United Kingdom. The two legal officers responsible for acting as the Council's senior responsible officer and REPA coordinator left the organisation when the shared legal service was formed. Though it is very unlikely for the councils to use REPA, as confirmed by each council's nil statistical return over the past years, there was a recognition that the existing joint REPA policy should be refreshed and the key roles reassigned to appropriate officers. A report was recently presented to the senior leadership team, and the key roles of the senior responsible officer, REPA coordinating officer and authorising officers have now been assigned, details of which can be found in Appendix 1 of the attached joint REPA policy. In terms of performance monitoring and training, the IPCO have adopted a more flexible approach to the arrangements for inspections of local authorities, as it has become apparent in recent years for a variety of reasons, which have included reduced resources, greater access to data matching, and overt rather than covert law enforcement, that most authorities have granted fewer or no recent surveillance requests. In November 2018, the IPCO advised that based on the information provided, the councils have demonstrated a level of compliance that removes, for the present, the requirement for a physical inspection. The last inspection was carried out in 2015. The IPCO noted that the draft joint policy document being presented today was clear and generally comprehensive, and importantly, that an all-training session has been organised. The training day took place on the 13th of November 2018, which put the councils in a position to be able to apply the Act in a lawful and efficient way if the need arose. I therefore recommend that the refreshed joint REPA policy and the changes in respect of officer roles be approved, and the change in the judicial oversight in the United Kingdom be noted. And I would call for a seconder. Thank you.
I'm happy to second the recommendation to the report.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, so I have a proposal and a seconder for MCA 19/6. Can I have a show of hands for approval? Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 12, MCA 19/7, the end of year risk position statement and progress report and revisions to risk management strategy. Page 153. To provide some clarity to those members new to risk management, I will provide an overview of the process. The Council's Significant Risk Register is reviewed at quarterly SLT workshops, where each risk is reviewed in terms of direction of travel, scoring, and mitigation still to complete. Potential new risks are also discussed. Each risk on the register is owned by a member of SLT, and following each workshop session, they will liaise with the respective member lead to ensure they are up to date on the risk position. The register is reported half-yearly to Cabinet for their approval, and this report provides Cabinet with the end-of-year significant risk register and also a summary of the work of the audit and risk management services during the last year. This register is at end of March 2019, so some risks may have changed since this time, and another review is due to be undertaken this month. On the register itself, you will see that each risk tells a story across the page, starting from the initial inherent scoring through to the current position and ending with a target score and outstanding actions to help achieve this score. Risks are categorised under 5 themes for ease of use. The report that accompanies the register provides an overview of the register as at 31st of March 2019. The current risk register has 27 risks. 16 are scored as medium, 9 as high, and 2 very high. Since the previous report to Cabinet, 1 risk has been removed in quarter 3, which was we may fail to deliver the financial projections set out within the BMBS business plan. This risk and associated actions is now being monitored via the relevant operational risk register. Operational risk registers are in place for all service areas and are updated at least on at least a quarterly basis. Assistant directors liaise with their respective corporate managers regarding any potential risks that may need escalating to the significant risk register. More project risk registers are being created and monitored, with the operational registers located on Connect. In addition to the end of year risk register, also attached is the risk management strategy, which has undergone its annual review. Minor revisions have been made relating to the risk matrix, providing more detailed descriptors. The risk appetite section has also been amended under the operational service delivery risk section. Approval from Cabinet is being sought for these amendments. Finally, reporting dates for future risk reports to Cabinet have been slightly altered to ensure they align with performance and finance reports. Before I ask for any questions, can I please have a seconder for this? Councillor Flatman.
I'm happy to support the report 3.1 on page 153.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got kind of 4 questions, but they're all the same one, as it were, in that with regards to several of the risks, the kind of target for a period over which the risk is to be reduced seems quite short. So, for example, community capacity, page 171, that's expected to be achieved between June and September 2019. Gateway 14, page 173, that's expected to be reduced by July, which is 2 months' time. Council reputation, page 178, that's expected to be reach its target from June to September this year. And universal credit, page 180 for April 2019. I've just picking out those 4. I'm particularly concerned about community capacity because that's something by which we really depend upon in this council in being able to work with our communities and ensure that we're able to both meet their needs and work in partnership with them. And I have a concern that how we're able to meet those risks within that short time frame. Thank you.
All of those that you mentioned are spread out across various portfolio holders. So, can you just tell me which ones they were again?
Community capacity, page 171.
Just take them one at a time. Thank you, Councillor Flatman.
I think they tied that one. I agree. It's, you know, whether they'll, you know, part of the relationship as the villages actually wanted to do some of this themselves, which is not always possible. But I think what was put in there was that the local plan would be well on the way by then too, which would help the situation. But yeah, I agree. We don't know if communities are going to work with us or not. Hopefully a lot of them will, especially with that local plan coming in.
What was the other one, Councillor Eburn?
Gateway 14 on page 173.
Councillor Brewster? Are you...
I think there are things moving on Gateway 14 which will alleviate the problems or the time scale sooner, but June 2019 may be a little bit early, I agree.
Chairman, if I can assist, and I'm assuming we're looking at 2D just for completeness at the moment. 4D. You look at 4D.
Yes,
So,
my question was that the you know, if we're aiming to have mitigated that risk and met the target by July 2019,
and we're not.
that was.
And we're not. That was the clarity. That's why I jumped in. So the July 2019 date relates to the immediate action to the left, so the column to the left. So developing the delivery model will be by July 2019, not reaching the target as planned in that respect. So that's what the date relates to. It relates to the actions in the column to the left.
But presumably that will help reach the target. Is what my council reputation. So it's page 178. It is risk. 5F. 5F.
So exactly the same. So as you'll see on in the column further action for comments, those are all the current activities that are undergoing at the moment in relation to the council's reputation, and with the relevant dates aligned to that in terms of those actions being completed. What you're seeing here and what you see is risk on a 6-monthly snapshot basis. What you're not seeing here is the fact that the senior leadership team reviews us on a regular basis. So when we're reviewing it, we'll be determining have those actions been completed and how have they moved the needle, as it were, in terms of the relativeness of that risk and what further needs to happen in relation to that risk to help to manage it. The very nature of many of the risks that you see here is that they'll never disappear entirely. It's about the level of mitigation that we put in place to mitigate.
Thank you very much. And my last one was 5H, which is universal credit, which I think we've all got some concern over.
Again, just to assist, I think we all share the same concern on that front, and many of the components of universal credit, of course, are outside of our control, not least the speed of rollout of the universal credit scheme. What you see here is our mitigations, again, in terms of our management of that. Reassuringly, at the moment, we're not seeing the kind of threats and impacts that we feared we might through universal credit, but don't read that as any level of complacency in that respect. We're certainly very mindful of the impact on our communities that can have, and so that's one of the key ones that the mitigation actions will be constantly kept under review.
I'd just like to bring in John Snell on this one as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to confirm and reiterate some of the points that have been raised around the table, we do actually have a next workshop in a couple of weeks with the members of the SLT. So again, we will revisit those and certainly take on board that the comments, and part of that process is to challenge right through from the risk, the inherent risk, right through to the residual risk. So we will look at the timings as well to make sure we're comfortable that they still are applicable and achievable.
Councillor Wellham.
It's a follow-up to 5H. It says there that a review of income management strategy and its outcomes was to be carried out last month. Is there any feedback from that? And supplementary is, at the end of the day, it could well be that this council will have to pick up some cost as there are more and more rent arrears, or the converse is that we actually pay to keep people from being homeless, because that's ultimately, rent arrears can lead to homelessness. So have we got sufficient staff and funding to make sure that we don't get into this situation where people are being made homeless?
Councillor Flatman, do you have an answer to that?
Well, I would like to think that we will be housing people because of the rent arrears due to universal credit. We can't just throw people out. Of course, there'll be some actions put in place to help these people until it is sorted out.
Just to add, councillors may be aware of the discretionary housing payments scheme. So every year we receive an amount of money from government to assist tenants, not just our tenants, but residents more generally, where they are in need in a short-term basis. What it can't do is act as rent for a long-term situation, because that's not a sticky plaster, that doesn't resolve the issue. But for example, if you had a situation where somebody's universal credit was delayed in terms of them receiving money, so you've got a unique period of rent arrears that would then resolve itself over a period of time, something like discretionary housing payments, we have access to that and our staff have access to that to be able to help people over that hump. As Councillor Flatman says, we're not in the business of evicting people, not least because we're also in the business of homelessness. And so it's entirely counterproductive from our perspective to evict people that they won't have to house or take responsibility for in another guise. Our whole focus and the team's whole focus, and we've been able to attract additional resources in conjunction with West Suffolk, is around homelessness prevention, and that's about sustaining tenancies at all costs effectively, so that people are able to stay in their own homes. And that has obviously wider social benefit values for people's lives, not just the cost, the financial cost, but the stability of being in a home and everything else that comes with it. So yes, we do have, in answer to your question.
Councillor Whitehead.
Sorry, could I just add as well that within the publicly available papers from the Shared Revenues Partnership, there's quite a bit of detail in terms of the rollout to universal credit, details of the discretionary housing payments made by Mid Suffolk, and you know, a full narrative behind that.
So, item 12, I have a proposer and a seconder for the end of year risk position statement. Can I have a show of hands in favour of approval?
Yes.
Thank you. So, item 13, MCA 19/8, the Thurston Neighbourhood Plan on page 201. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This, if memory serves, is the fourth of our neighbourhood plans that's coming up for referendum. I'd just like to run you briefly through the report you have in front of you. It updates Cabinet on the progress of the Thurston Neighbourhood Plan, and it sets out these two recommendations that the Parish Council be requested to make the necessary modifications in accordance with the examiner's recommendations, and that subject to the satisfactory completion of those, the neighbourhood plan be advanced to a local referendum covering the parish of Thurston. Officers have been speaking to Thurston Parish Council clerk today and have been advised that Thurston is making good progress on modifying the neighbourhood plan and should be in a position to send us a copy for checking later this week, hopefully. Paragraph 4.2 summarises the key consultation dates. Paras 4.3 to 4.11 provide more detail about the examination process, with key findings from the final report summarised at paragraph 4.7. Paragraph 4.14 reminds us that a majority yes vote at referendum means we must adopt the plan. That is, it becomes part of the development plan framework for the neighbourhood plan area. And section 6 addresses the financial implications. The £20,000 payment is claimable by Mid Suffolk once a referendum date has been set. This will be sufficient to cover all our costs and will be claimed at the next available opportunity. Just one or two key points from the plan. It notes that Thurston is under continued development pressure. It sets out 13 objectives and 12 plan policies themed around spatial strategy, housing and design, community infrastructure, movement and environment. It does not allocate sites for housing development, but it does refer to what is already permitted. But it does seek to focus new development within the settlement boundary, emphasising the need for housing to meet the needs of older people and young first-time buyers. Other policies seek to ensure that Thurston can continue to grow in a sustainable and controlled manner, that its village character is retained, that its landscape and environment are well covered. This is in Policy 10, and its local green spaces, and that new development promotes sustainable transport options. The railway station foot crossing remains a major concern, and supporting text within the plan seeks viable long-term solutions to passenger safety. So I would like to propose the recommendations on page 201, recommendations 3.1, 3.2, and I look for a seconder, please.
Flatman.
I'm happy to second the proposal and the recommendations 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 on page 201.
That's just 3.1 and 3.2. Do I have any questions? I have a proposer and I have a seconder for the Thurston Neighbourhood Plan. Clauses 3.1 and 3.2 on page 201. Can I have a show of hands in support of approval? Thank you. Item 14, we're going to be moving into private session. So exclusion of the public, which term includes the press, to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, do I need to read this?
Yeah.
It's got no public. The public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I propose, can I have a seconder please? Councillor Brewster?
Yes, I'll second the proposal, Madam Chair.
Can I have a show of hands in support? Thank you. That's approved.